The morning mist clung to the rocky outcrops like a shroud, hiding the secrets that these mountains had witnessed for decades. Elena Kozlova pressed her body against the cold stone, feeling the familiar weight of her rifle across her back. At 26, she had already seen more combat than most soldiers would in a lifetime, but today felt different. The silence was too perfect, too calculated. She had been tracking this particular enemy squad for 3 days through the treacherous terrain of the Caucasus region. Intelligence reports indicated they were a specialized unit responsible for targeting civilian villages in the valley below. Women, children, elderly people who had nowhere to run when the fighting came to their doorsteps. Elena had grown up in one of those villages. She knew what it meant when armed strangers appeared at dawn. The radio crackled softly in her ear. Captain Volkov's voice was tense, barely above a whisper. Ghost 7, this is Control. Enemy movement confirmed in Sector 4. Count shows 12 hostiles, heavily armed, moving toward the settlement. Your position? Elena adjusted her scope, scanning the valley floor through the early morning haze. Control, Ghost 7. I have visual on the target area. No enemy contact yet. Proceeding to observation point. Her breathing was controlled, methodical. Years of training had taught her that panic was the enemy of precision. Every movement had to be deliberate, every decision calculated. She had earned her call sign Ghost 7, not just for her ability to remain unseen, but for the way she could eliminate targets and vanish before anyone realized what had happened. The path ahead wound through a series of narrow ridges that would provide excellent cover, but also limited her escape routes. Elena had studied these mountains since childhood, hiking with her grandfather who had fought in these same hills decades earlier. He had taught her that the land itself could be either your greatest ally or your deadliest enemy, depending on how well you understood its moods. As she moved forward, Elena's mind wandered briefly to the letter she had received from her younger sister just last week. Anya was studying medicine in the capital, far from the conflict zones, living the normal life that Elena had chosen to sacrifice for the greater good. The letter spoke of university exams, new friends, plans for the future. Simple things that seemed impossibly distant from Elena's current reality. A twig snapped somewhere behind her. Elena froze instantly, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. In the absolute silence of the mountains, even the smallest sound could mean the difference between life and death. She waited, counting her heartbeats, listening for any follow-up sounds that might indicate human movement. Nothing. After 2 full minutes of motionless waiting, Elena resumed her advance. The observation point she had selected was a natural rock formation that jutted out from the mountainside like a giant's thumb. From there, she would have a clear view of the valley approaches while remaining completely hidden from below. It was also a position from which she could cover the most likely routes the enemy squad would take. The climb to reach the position was treacherous. Loose rocks threatened to give way under her boots, and the morning dew had made every surface slippery. Elena moved with the patience of someone who understood that rushing meant dying. Each handhold was tested, each footstep placed with deliberate care. As she climbed, her thoughts turned to the briefing she had received the night before. The enemy squad was not just any collection of soldiers. They were specialists, trained in mountain warfare and known for their brutal efficiency. Their leader was a man called Kozlov, no relation to Elena despite the similar surname. He was wanted for war crimes in 3 different regions, always managing to slip away just before capture. Elena reached the observation point just as the sun began to burn through the morning mist. She quickly set up her position, using natural camouflage to blend with the rocky surroundings. Her rifle, a precision instrument that she had customized over months of careful adjustment, was positioned to provide maximum flexibility while maintaining concealment. The wait began. In sniper operations, patience was more than a virtue. It was a survival skill. Elena had once remained motionless for 18 hours, waiting for a single shot that would save an entire convoy from ambush. Today, she did not know how long the wait would be, but she was prepared for whatever time the mission required. The radio remained silent except for the occasional position report from other units in the area. Elena was operating essentially alone, though she knew that backup forces were stationed several kilometers away. The nature of her mission meant that by the time help could reach her, it would likely be too late to make a difference. As the sun climbed higher, Elena began to notice movement in the valley below. At first, it was just shadows shifting among the trees, patterns that might have been wind-blown branches to an untrained observer. But, Elena's trained, I picked out the subtle signs of human movement. The enemy was approaching, exactly as intelligence had predicted. She adjusted her scope, bringing the valley floor into sharp focus. Through the magnified view, she could now clearly see armed figures moving with tactical precision through the forest. They were spread out in a classic search formation, maintaining communication through hand signals while avoiding the obvious paths that might be monitored or mined. Elena counted them as they moved. 1, 2, 3. By the time they had all emerged from the tree line, she had confirmed 12 hostiles, exactly as reported. They were well equipped with modern weapons and tactical gear. This was not a ragtag group of irregulars, but a professional military unit with serious firepower. The lead scout was a tall figure who moved with the confidence of someone who knew these mountains well. Elena assumed this was Kozlov himself, leading from the front, as was his reputation. Behind him, the squad moved in a practice formation that spoke of extensive training and combat experience. Elena's radio crackled again. Ghost 7, Control. Do you have visual confirmation on the targets? Confirmed, Control. 12 hostiles in standard mountain formation, approaching the settlement from the northeast. Estimated time to civilian contact, 40 minutes. Copy that. You are cleared to engage at your discretion. Remember, protecting the civilians is the primary objective. Elena acknowledged the transmission and settled into her firing position. The range was approximately 800 meters, well within her effective range, but challenging enough to require perfect execution. Wind conditions were light, but variable, and she would need to account for the downward angle of her shots. The first major decision was which target to engage first. Standard tactical doctrine would suggest eliminating the leader to create confusion among the remaining forces. However, Elena noticed that 2 of the squad members were carrying what appeared to be heavy weapons, possibly rocket-propelled grenades or mortars. Those weapons could cause massive casualties among the civilians, making them higher priority targets despite the tactical advantages of eliminating the leader first. As she made her calculations, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. The enemy squad was not heading directly toward the main settlement as expected. Instead, they were angling toward a smaller cluster of buildings where the local school was located. Today was a school day, which meant that dozens of children would be gathered in a single location, completely unaware of the approaching danger. Elena keyed her radio again. Control, Ghost 7. Enemy is deviating toward the school complex. Civilian children in immediate danger. I am engaging now. Copy, Ghost 7. Engage at will. Support is en route, but 20 minutes out. 20 minutes. Elena looked through her scope at the approaching squad and calculated their rate of movement. They would reach the school in less than 15 minutes. She would have to stop 12 armed, trained soldiers by herself, with no support and no backup plan. Elena chambered her first round and settled into the rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. Inhale slowly, let out half the breath, find the target, account for wind and distance, squeeze the trigger smoothly. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and through the scope, she watched the first target drop. The man carrying the heavy weapon crumpled to the ground, the distinctive crack of the rifle shot echoing through the valley a moment later. The rest of the squad immediately scattered, seeking cover and trying to identify the direction of the threat. Elena was already acquiring her second target. The second shot took down the other heavy weapons specialist before he could find adequate cover. Elena knew that eliminating these 2 targets had significantly reduced the squad's ability to cause mass casualties, but It had also alerted them to her presence. They would now be actively hunting her while continuing their mission. Elena shifted position slightly, using a different firing angle to confuse any attempt to triangulate her location. Through her scope, she could see the squad leader shouting orders, pointing in various directions as he tried to organize a response. The remaining 10 soldiers were spreading out, some moving to flank her position while others continued toward the school. The third shot was more difficult. The target was moving erratically, using available cover effectively. Elena had to lead the shot significantly, predicting where the soldier would be when the bullet arrived. The shot was successful, but she knew that her luck with moving targets would not hold indefinitely. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from below as the enemy squad began firing in her general direction. Most of the shots went wide, but a few struck the rocks near her position, sending stone chips flying dangerously close to her head. Elena pressed herself lower against the rocks, realizing that they had at least identified her general location. The radio crackled with urgent updates from control, reporting that reinforcements were moving as fast as possible through the difficult terrain. Elena knew that the next few minutes would determine whether the school full of children lived or died, and whether she would survive to tell the story. She could see 4 of the remaining soldiers breaking away from the group, moving rapidly toward the school while their comrades kept her pinned down with suppressive fire. Elena made a split-second decision that would haunt her for years afterward. She exposed herself to enemy fire, rising to a position where she could get clear shots at the soldiers approaching the school. The 4th shot stopped the lead soldier just 100 meters from the school building. The 5th shot took down another before Elena was forced to duck as a concentrated burst of automatic weapons fire shattered the rocks around her position. Stone fragments cut her cheek, and she felt blood trickling down her face. Elena realized that her position was compromised. The enemy had identified her location accurately enough to make staying there suicidal. But moving would give the remaining soldiers time to reach the school and complete whatever horrific plan they had for the children inside. She made another decision that defied every rule of sniper tactics. Instead of withdrawing to a safer position, Elena began moving forward, down the mountainside toward the enemy position. It was exactly the opposite of what they would expect, and it might give her the element of surprise she needed to protect the civilians. The descent was treacherous under the best of circumstances, but doing it while under fire and carrying a rifle made it nearly impossible. Elena half slid, half fell down the steep slope, using trees and rocks for cover while trying to maintain some control over her movement. Enemy bullets whined past her head, some so close that she could feel the heat of their passage. As she reached a small ledge about halfway down the mountain, Elena could see that 3 soldiers had broken off from the main group and were now climbing toward her position while the others continued toward the school. She was caught between 2 groups, outnumbered and outgunned with limited ammunition and no backup. Elena settled into a prone position behind a fallen tree and acquired her 6th target. The soldier was climbing steadily toward her, apparently confident that the difficult terrain would protect him from accurate fire. Elena proved him wrong with a shot that sent him tumbling down the mountainside. The return fire was immediate and intense. The fallen tree that was protecting Elena began to disintegrate under the impact of dozens of bullets. She could hear the angry whine of ricochets and the sharp crack of bullets passing directly overhead. In moments, her cover would be completely destroyed. Elena rolled to her left, using the natural contour of the ledge to put a small ridge between herself and the enemy fire. From this position, she could no longer see the school directly, but she could hear shouting voices that suggested the remaining soldiers were getting closer to the building. The 7th shot was taken at extreme, close range as one of the flanking soldiers appeared at the edge of her position. Elena barely had time to swing her rifle around before the enemy soldier spotted her. The shot was almost point-blank, more like using a rifle as an oversized pistol than proper sniper work. Elena immediately rolled again, knowing that muzzle flash would have revealed her exact position to any other enemies in the area. As she moved, she heard the distinctive sound of a grenade being thrown. She had perhaps 3 seconds to get clear of the blast radius. The explosion shattered the morning air, sending rocks and debris flying in all directions. Elena felt the shock wave pass through the ground beneath her, and her ears rang from the proximity of the blast. But she was alive, and her rifle was still functional. Through the ringing in her ears, Elena could hear something that made her heart race. Children's voices, high and frightened, coming from the direction of the school. The enemy had reached the building, and the real horror was about to begin unless she could stop it. Elena forced herself to her feet, ignoring the cuts and bruises from the grenade blast. She could see the school building clearly now, and what she saw filled her with rage. 2 soldiers were positioned outside the main entrance, while another was apparently forcing his way inside. The remaining members of the squad were setting up a perimeter around the building. Elena knew that she was probably about to die, but she also knew that she was the only thing standing between those children and a massacre. She had started this engagement with 12 bullets. Now she had 5 rounds left and at least 7 remaining enemies. The 8th shot was her best of the day, taken while moving at a range of nearly 400 meters. The bullet struck the soldier who was entering the school building, dropping him in the doorway and blocking the entrance. Elena immediately shifted her aim to the soldier stationed outside the building's main entrance. The 9th shot missed by inches as the target moved unexpectedly. Elena cursed under her breath and worked the bolt action to chamber her next round. She now had 3 bullets left and 6 remaining enemies who knew exactly where she was and were converging on her position. Elena made her final tactical decision of the engagement. Instead of conserving her remaining ammunition for defensive purposes, she would use it to eliminate the soldiers closest to the school building, then rely on her sidearm and whatever improvised weapons she could find to deal with the rest. The 10th shot eliminated the soldier at the school entrance. Elena immediately shifted to target another soldier who was moving toward a window on the side of the building, apparently looking for an alternative way inside. The 11th shot was her last chance to use the rifle effectively. Elena took extra time to ensure perfect placement, knowing that after this shot, she would be reduced to her pistol against multiple enemies with automatic weapons. The shot was perfect, eliminating another threat to the children. Elena slung her rifle across her back and drew her sidearm, reliable pistol that she had carried through dozens of missions. She began moving rapidly down the mountainside toward the school, knowing that the remaining soldiers would now be expecting her to attack their position directly. As she moved, Elena could hear adult voices from the school building, teachers who were trying to keep the children calm and safe. The sound gave her strength, reminding her exactly why she was risking everything in this impossible fight. The first enemy soldier Elena encountered at close range was positioned behind a stone wall that surrounded the school property. He was focused on watching the mountainside for her approach, apparently unaware that she had moved far enough down to flank his position. Elena's first pistol shot took him completely by surprise. Elena immediately moved to take the fallen soldier's position behind the stone wall. From here, she could see 3 more enemies positioned around the school building. Her pistol held 15 rounds, but accurate shooting with a handgun at these ranges would be extremely challenging. Elena's military training had included extensive close-quarters combat instruction, but using those skills while alone against multiple opponents was something she had hoped never to experience in real combat. Now, with children's lives hanging in the balance, she would have to make every shot count. The next phase of the engagement would test every skill Elena had learned, every ounce of courage she possessed, and every bit of luck she could gather. The morning mist was beginning to clear, providing better visibility, but also making concealment more difficult. Elena could see that reinforcements were still several minutes away, meaning that the outcome of this battle would be determined by her actions alone. As Elena prepared for the final phase of her impossible mission, she thought briefly of her sister's letter, of the normal life that seemed so distant from this moment of violence and terror. Then she pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. Somewhere in the building behind her, dozens of children were counting on her to succeed, even though they didn't know she existed. Elena checked her pistol one more time, said a brief prayer to whatever forces might be listening, and prepared to finish what she had started. The morning that had begun with routine surveillance was about to conclude with the most important fight of her life. Elena crouched behind the stone wall, her heart pounding as she assessed the tactical situation. For enemies remained active around the school building, and from their positions, it was clear they were preparing for a coordinated assault on the building. Through the windows, she could see movement that suggested the teachers were gathering the children into the safest areas possible. But a classroom offered little protection against determined attackers. The soldier she had just eliminated carried an assault rifle and additional ammunition magazines. Elena quickly appropriated the weapon, checking its condition and ammunition count. The rifle felt different from her sniper weapon, heavier and less precise, but it would give her the firepower advantage she desperately needed for close-quarters combat. Elena could hear radio chatter from the remaining enemy soldiers, speaking in a language she recognized but did not fully understand. However, their tone and the urgency of their movements made their intentions clear. They were running out of time and patience, and they intended to complete their mission regardless of the resistance they had encountered. The first enemy soldier Elena could see clearly was positioned near the school's side entrance, apparently trying to find a way to breach the door without exposing himself to fire from her direction. He was partially concealed behind a maintenance shed, but Elena could see enough of his position to make an accurate shot possible. Elena raised the captured assault rifle, aimed carefully despite her elevated heart rate, and squeezed the trigger. The burst of automatic fire was louder and more violent than her sniper rifle, but the result was immediate and decisive. The soldier behind the maintenance shed dropped out of sight. Immediately, return fire erupted from two different positions. Elena pressed herself against the stone wall as bullets chipped away at the ancient stones just inches above her head. The enemy soldiers were well-trained and disciplined, responding to her attack with coordinated suppressive fire while repositioning to improve their tactical advantage. Elena waited for a brief lull in the gunfire, then rolled to her left along the base of the wall. From this new position, she could see a second enemy soldier who was advancing toward the school's main entrance while his companion provided covering fire. The soldier was moving in short rushes, using available cover effectively, but Elena had fought enough battles to predict his pattern. When the advancing soldier paused behind a small tree, Elena was ready. She fired a controlled burst that caught him just as he prepared to make his next move. The soldier stumbled and fell, his weapon clattering across the paved area in front of the school. Two enemies remained visible, but Elena suspected there might be others she had not yet located. The intensity of return fire suggested that the remaining soldiers were well-armed and determined to complete their mission despite the losses they had already suffered. Elena heard a sound that chilled her blood, the voice of a child crying from somewhere inside the school building. The sound was quickly muffled, probably by a teacher trying to keep the children quiet, but it served as a stark reminder of what was at stake in this engagement. The next enemy position Elena identified was behind an overturned maintenance cart near the school's rear entrance. The soldier had chosen his cover well, and Elena realized that engaging him from her current position would expose her to fire from the remaining enemies. She needed to change her approach. Elena decided to use the same tactic that had served her well during the descent from the sniper position. Do the unexpected. Instead of trying to outshoot the enemy from a distance, she would close the distance and use surprise to overcome their numerical advantage. Elena began moving along the stone wall toward a position that would allow her to approach the rear of the school building from an unexpected angle. The movement required her to cross several areas where she would be exposed to enemy fire, but staying in one position would eventually result in being outflanked and overwhelmed. As Elena moved, She heard the distinctive sound of a flashbang grenade being prepared. The enemy soldiers were apparently planning to breach the school building using stun grenades to disorient any defenders inside before beginning their assault on the civilians. Elena broke into a sprint, abandoning stealth in favor of speed. She had to reach the enemy position before they could throw the flashbang into the building full of children. The sound of her running footsteps across the gravel drew immediate attention from the remaining enemies. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as Elena sprinted toward the maintenance cart. Bullets whined past her head and kicked up dust clouds around her feet, but Elena kept running with the desperate determination of someone who knew that slowing down meant death. Elena reached the maintenance cart just as the enemy soldier behind it was preparing to throw the flashbang grenade toward the school building. Elena's arrival was so sudden and unexpected that the soldier barely had time to turn before Elena's rifle fire eliminated the threat. Elena immediately grabbed the flashbang grenade, noting that the pin had already been pulled, but the safety lever was still in place. She had perhaps 4 seconds before the device would detonate automatically. Elena made a split-second decision and hurled the grenade toward where she had last seen muzzle flashes from the remaining enemy positions. The flashbang detonated with a brilliant white flash and a thunderous boom that temporarily disoriented everyone in the area, including Elena. However, she had closed her eyes and covered her ears at the moment of detonation, so her recovery time was faster than that of the enemy soldiers who had been caught completely off guard. Elena used those precious seconds of enemy disorientation to advance toward the school building itself. From this position, she could better protect the entrances while maintaining tactical flexibility. She could also hear more clearly what was happening inside the building, which would help her determine if any enemies had already gained access. Through the ringing in her ears, Elena could hear adult voices inside the school speaking in calm, reassuring tones despite the obvious terror of the situation. The teachers were displaying remarkable courage, maintaining order among the children, even while gunfire raged outside their building. Elena positioned herself near the main entrance to the school, where she could monitor the most likely approach routes while maintaining communication with the people inside the building. She tapped gently on the door and called out in a voice just loud enough to be heard inside. "This is Elena Kozlova, military. I am outside protecting the building. Stay away from windows and keep the children calm. Help is coming." A woman's voice responded from inside, probably a teacher or administrator. "How many are there? Are we safe? I am handling the situation. Keep everyone away from the doors and windows. Do not come outside until I tell you it is safe." Elena knew that she should not have revealed her name or position to civilians during an active engagement, but the psychological effect of letting them know they were not completely helpless was worth the tactical risk. Fear could cause people to make dangerous decisions, and Elena needed the people inside to remain calm and cooperative. Elena heard movement from the direction where she had thrown the flashbang grenade. At least one enemy soldier had recovered from the disorientation and was apparently trying to reposition for another attack. Elena needed to locate and eliminate the remaining threats before they could regroup and coordinate a new assault. Elena moved around the perimeter of the school building, using the structure itself for cover while searching for the remaining enemy soldiers. The building was single-story but quite long, with multiple entrances and numerous windows that would need to be protected. As Elena rounded the corner toward the back of the building, she encountered an enemy soldier who was apparently trying to break through a window using the butt of his rifle as a hammer. Elena's appearance surprised him completely, and her rifle fire ended the threat before the soldier could respond. Elena quickly checked the window for damage and was relieved to see that while the glass was cracked, it had not been completely breached. She could see frightened children's faces pressed against the glass from inside, and she held up her hand in what she hoped was a reassuring gesture before moving on to secure the rest of the building's perimeter. Elena completed her circuit of the building without encountering additional enemies, but she knew that did not necessarily mean all threats had been eliminated. Enemy soldiers could be concealed in numerous locations around the school property, waiting for an opportunity to complete their mission. Elena's radio, which had been silent during the intense close-quarters fighting, suddenly crackled to life with an urgent transmission from Control. Ghost 7, this is Control. Sitrep requested. Multiple explosions and small arms fire reported in your area. Control, Ghost 7. Engaged 12-man enemy squad at the school location. Multiple enemy Kia, threat level significantly reduced, but not eliminated. Civilian secure for now, but I need immediate backup. Copy, Ghost 7. Backup is 8 minutes out. Can you maintain position until then? Elena looked around at the school property, noting multiple positions where enemy soldiers could be concealed, the numerous approach routes that would need to be monitored, and her own dwindling ammunition supply. 8 minutes was a long time in combat, especially when defending a fixed position against an unknown number of enemies. Affirm, Control. Will maintain position. Advise backup units that civilians are inside the main building. Exercise extreme caution with any explosive weapons. Elena found a position near the school's main entrance that provided good visibility in multiple directions while offering some protection from small arms fire. From here, she could monitor the most likely approach routes while remaining close enough to the building to intercept any attempts to breach the structure. As Elena settled into her defensive position, she became aware of how much the engagement had taken out of her physically. The sprint down the mountainside, the close-quarters combat, and the adrenaline of protecting children had left her breathing heavily and beginning to feel the effects of fatigue. Elena checked her remaining ammunition carefully. The assault rifle she had taken from the enemy soldier had perhaps 30 rounds remaining, and her pistol was fully loaded with 15 rounds. She also had 2 fragmentation grenades that she had taken from eliminated enemy soldiers, but using explosive weapons near a building full of children would be extremely dangerous. Elena heard a sound that made her freeze, the distinctive noise of someone climbing over the stone wall that surrounded the school property. Someone was approaching, trying to move quietly, but not quite succeeding in the task. Elena raised her rifle and aimed toward the source of the sound, ready to fire the moment a target became visible. A figure appeared over the wall, moving carefully but purposefully toward the school building. Elena was about to fire when something about the figure's movement pattern caught her attention. The person was advancing, but not with the tactical precision she had observed from the enemy soldiers. This person was moving more like someone who was lost or confused rather than someone executing a military assault. Elena held her fire for a few more seconds, trying to determine whether this was an enemy combatant or possibly a civilian who had wandered into the area at the worst possible time. The distinction was crucial, as shooting an innocent person would haunt her forever, but failing to shoot an enemy soldier could result in the deaths of children. The figure moved closer, and Elena could see that it was an elderly man carrying what appeared to be a walking stick rather than a weapon. He was clearly disoriented and frightened, probably drawn by the sounds of gunfire and explosions, but not understanding the danger he was walking into. Elena made a quick decision. She rose from her concealed position and called out to the man in a firm but not threatening voice. "Sir, this is a military operation. You need to leave this area immediately for your own safety." The elderly man looked toward Elena with obvious relief at hearing a human voice that was not shouting orders or threats. He appeared to be in his 70s, probably a local resident who had been attempting to check on the school when he heard the fighting. "The children," the old man said, his voice shaking with concern. "I heard gunfire. Are the children safe?" "The children are safe, but you need to leave now. Go back the way you came, and do not return until the military gives an all-clear signal." The old man nodded and began to turn away, but Elena suddenly realized that his presence might actually be helpful rather than problematic. As a local resident, he would know the area around the school better than she did, and he might be able to provide information about possible hiding places or approach routes that enemy soldiers could use. "Wait," Elena called out. "Before you go, Are there any other buildings or hiding places near here where armed men might take cover? The old man thought for a moment, then pointed toward a cluster of storage buildings about 200 meters from the school. There are old grain silos over there and a maintenance building for the county equipment. Also, there's a small bridge over the stream that runs behind the school property. Elena realized that she had not checked any of those locations during her hasty perimeter sweep. Enemy soldiers could easily be concealed in any of those areas, waiting for an opportunity to launch a renewed attack on the school. She had been focusing on immediate threats to the building itself, but a competent enemy would use standoff positions to observe her movements and plan their next assault. Thank you. Now please leave immediately and warn any other civilians to stay away from this area. The old man nodded and hurried away, moving with surprising speed for someone of his apparent age. Elena watched him go, then turned her attention to the locations he had mentioned. The storage buildings and bridge were far enough away that she could not secure them without leaving the school building undefended, but close enough that enemy soldiers positioned there could make her job much more difficult. Elena keyed her radio again. Control, Ghost 7. Local civilian reports possible enemy concealment positions at grain silos and county maintenance building approximately 200 meters northwest of the school. Also, small bridge over stream behind school property. Request backup units. Check those locations when they arrive. Copy, Ghost 7. Backup units advised. ETA now 6 minutes. 6 minutes still felt like an eternity, especially now that Elena knew there were multiple locations where enemy soldiers could be hiding. She needed to maintain security around the school building while simultaneously monitoring those distant positions for signs of renewed enemy activity. Elena heard a sound from inside the school that made her smile despite the circumstances. Children's voices singing quietly. Apparently, one of the teachers had organized a sing-along to keep the children calm and distracted from the frightening sounds outside their building. The choice showed remarkable presence of mind and courage on the part of the teachers. Elena's moment of appreciation for the teacher's efforts was interrupted by the sight of movement near the grain silos the old man had mentioned. Through her rifle scope, she could see at least 2 figures moving among the buildings, and their tactical positioning suggested they were definitely not civilians. Elena faced a difficult decision. The enemy soldiers at the grain silos were far enough away that they did not pose an immediate threat to the school building, but they could potentially pin her down with long-range fire while other enemies approached the school from different directions. However, moving to engage them would require leaving her position near the school, potentially opening the building to assault from closer range. Elena decided to maintain her current position while keeping the distant enemies under observation. If they began advancing toward the school, she would have to engage them. If they remained at the grain silos, she would wait for backup to arrive and deal with them. The radio crackled with another transmission from control. Go 7, be advised that backup units report possible enemy movement in Sector 7, approximately 1 kilometer from your location. Additional hostiles may be approaching your position. Elena's heart sank. The engagement was far from over, and she was about to face additional enemies while her ammunition was running low and fatigue was beginning to affect her performance. The children inside the school were still depending on her to protect them, but the odds were becoming increasingly difficult. Elena checked her watch and calculated that backup was still 4 minutes away. In combat, 4 minutes could contain several lifetimes' worth of action and decision-making. Elena prepared herself for whatever the next phase of this engagement would bring, knowing that the children behind her were counting on her to succeed against impossible odds. The morning sun was now fully visible, burning away the last of the mist and providing clear visibility across the entire area around the school. Elena could see the grain silos clearly now, and her worst fears were confirmed. At least 3 enemy soldiers were positioned among the buildings, and they appear to be setting up some kind of heavy weapon. Elena realized that the next few minutes would determine not only her own survival, but the fate of every child inside the school building behind her. She checked her rifle one more time, said another brief prayer, and prepared for the most challenging phase of what was already the most difficult engagement of her military career. Elena watched through her scope as the enemy soldiers at the grain silos completed their setup of what appeared to be a mortar or rocket launcher. The implications hit her immediately. They could shell the school building from that distance with minimal risk to themselves, while she was powerless to stop them without leaving the children completely undefended. The weight of impossible choices pressed down on Elena's shoulders. Every tactical option available to her involved unacceptable risks to the civilians she was sworn to protect. Staying meant watching the enemy destroy the school building with heavy weapons. Advancing meant abandoning her defensive position and potentially allowing other enemies to assault the building while she was away. Elena made a decision that violated every principle of defensive tactics she had ever learned. She would advance toward the grain silos, using speed and aggression to disrupt the enemy's heavy weapons position before they could bring their firepower to bear on the school building. It was suicide by any reasonable military standard, but it was the only option that offered any chance of keeping the children alive. Elena approached the main entrance to the school building and spoke through the door to the teachers inside. I have to leave this position for a few minutes to stop enemies who are setting up heavy weapons. Keep everyone away from windows, and do not open any doors until backup arrives or until I return. A woman's voice responded from inside, tight with fear but still controlled. How will we know it's safe? How will we know it's really you when you come back? Elena thought quickly. When I return, I will sing the same song the children were singing a few minutes ago. If anyone approaches this building without singing that song, do not open the doors. Elena did not wait for a response. Every second of delay gave the enemy more time to complete their heavy weapons setup and potentially call for additional reinforcements. Elena began running toward the grain silos, using whatever cover was available while maintaining maximum speed. The distance to the grain silos was greater than Elena had initially estimated, nearly 300 meters of open ground with minimal cover. As she ran, Elena could hear radio chatter from the enemy position, confirming that they had spotted her movement and were tracking her approach. Elena had covered about half the distance when the enemy soldiers at the grain silos opened fire with automatic weapons. The range was long for accurate shooting with rifles, but the volume of fire was sufficient to make Elena's advance extremely dangerous. Bullets cracked past her head and kicked up dust clouds around her feet as she zigzagged across the open ground. Elena reached a small depression in the ground that offered temporary cover from the enemy fire. From this position, she could see the grain silos clearly and count the number of enemies she was facing. 3 soldiers were visible, one operating what was definitely a mortar, while the other 2 provided security with rifles. Elena realized that she was now committed to an assault against a prepared position with 3 enemy soldiers, while she was alone and running low on ammunition. Under normal circumstances, such an attack would require at least a full squad of soldiers with supporting weapons. Elena had an assault rifle with perhaps 20 rounds remaining and her pistol as backup. Elena heard the distinctive sound of a mortar being fired. She had perhaps 10 seconds before the shell impacted somewhere near the school building. Elena rose from her concealed position and began running again, firing short bursts toward the enemy position to disrupt their aim and hopefully prevent them from firing additional rounds. The mortar shell exploded harmlessly in an open field about 50 meters from the school building, but Elena knew that the next round would be more accurately aimed. Enemy mortars typically required 2 or 3 ranging shots before achieving accuracy, meaning that the children had very little time before the building came under effective bombardment. Elena reached a position about 100 meters from the grain silos when the enemy fired their second mortar round. This shell landed much closer to the school, close enough that Elena could see debris flying past the windows of the building. The next round would almost certainly hit the building directly. Elena made her final tactical decision of the engagement. She rose from cover and began a direct assault on the enemy position, firing her rifle as rapidly as accuracy would allow while running straight toward the grain silos. It was a desperate, last-ditch effort to prevent the third mortar round from being fired. The enemy soldiers at the grain silos were not prepared for such an aggressive assault by a single person. Their position defenses were oriented toward providing long-range fire support rather than repelling a close assault. Elena's sudden appearance at close range caught them temporarily off guard. Elena's rifle fire struck the soldier operating the mortar just as he was preparing to drop the third shell into the weapon's tube. The soldier fell away from the mortar, and Elena heard the distinctive metallic ring of the shell falling to the ground rather than being fired. Elena continued her assault, knowing that the two remaining enemy soldiers would recover quickly and return fire. Elena dove behind one of the grain silos just as automatic weapons fire began chewing up the ground where she had been standing moments before. Elena found herself in close-quarters combat with two enemy soldiers who knew the terrain around the grain silos better than she did. They could move between the buildings while she was pinned down behind cover, and they had the advantage of prepared defensive positions. Elena heard one of the enemy soldiers moving around the right side of the grain silo, while the other maintained suppressive fire from the front. She was about to be caught in a crossfire that would be impossible to survive with the limited cover available in her current position. Elena made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of trying to defend her position behind the grain silo, she climbed onto the structure itself, using maintenance ladders to reach the top of the cylindrical building. From this elevated position, she would have a clear view of the area around the grain silos, but she would also be completely exposed to enemy fire. Elena reached the top of the grain silo just as one of the enemy soldiers appeared around the corner where she had been hiding moments before. Elena's rifle fire from the unexpected elevated position eliminated the threat before the soldier could react to her new location. The remaining enemy soldier began firing at Elena's position on top of the grain silo, but the angle was difficult and his shots were not accurate. Elena had a much clearer view of his position, and her return fire forced him to take cover behind a smaller storage building. Elena realized that she was now in a standoff situation. She had a better field of view from her elevated position, but she was also completely exposed and running dangerously low on ammunition. The enemy soldier was in hard cover, but had limited mobility and visibility. Elena heard the sound that she had been waiting for throughout the entire engagement, the distinctive noise of military vehicles approaching at high speed. Backup was finally arriving, and the cavalry was coming over the hill in the most literal sense possible. The sound of approaching reinforcements had an immediate effect on the enemy soldier's behavior. Instead of continuing the standoff, he began moving rapidly away from the grain silos, apparently attempting to escape before the backup units could surround the area. Elena fired her remaining rifle ammunition at the fleeing enemy soldier, but could not achieve a hit at the extended range while shooting from an unstable platform. The soldier disappeared into a tree line beyond the grain silos, and Elena could not determine whether he had been wounded or had escaped completely unharmed. Elena climbed down from the grain silo and began moving back toward the school building. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but she needed to ensure that the children were still safe and that no additional enemies had approached the building while she was engaged at the grain silos. As Elena approached the school building, she could see military vehicles converging on the area from multiple directions. The backup forces had finally arrived in sufficient strength to secure the entire area and ensure that no remaining enemies could threaten the civilians. Elena stopped outside the main entrance to the school building and began singing the children's song she had heard earlier, using it as the identification signal she had promised to the teachers inside. Her voice was hoarse from breathing hard during the combat, but the melody was recognizable. The door to the school building opened cautiously, and Elena could see the face of a middle-aged woman who was apparently the principal or senior teacher. The woman's expression showed relief so profound that it was almost overwhelming to witness. "Are they gone? Are the children safe?" Elena nodded, suddenly, feeling the full weight of exhaustion that adrenaline had been holding at bay throughout the engagement. The immediate threat is neutralized. Military backup has arrived to secure the area. The children are safe. Elena heard vehicles pulling up behind her and turned to see soldiers in familiar uniforms dismounting from armored personnel carriers. Captain Volkov himself was leading the relief force, his face showing a combination of concern and professional interest in the tactical situation. Ghost 7, report, Captain Volkov called out as he approached Elena's position. Elena straightened to attention despite her fatigue and the various cuts and bruises she had sustained during the engagement. Sir, enemy squad neutralized. 11 confirmed kills, 1 possible escape. Civilian population secure, no injuries reported. Captain Volkov looked around at the evidence of the engagement. The scattered positions where enemy soldiers had fallen, the damaged areas around the school building, the mortar position at the grain silos that had been disrupted just in time to prevent catastrophic damage to the building full of children. Outstanding work, Sergeant. How many enemy soldiers were you engaging? 12 initially, sir. I was able to eliminate 11 confirmed, with 1 possible escape from the grain silo position. Captain Volkov's expression showed surprise and something that might have been disbelief. You engage a 12-man squad by yourself and achieved 11 kills while protecting a building full of civilians. Elena nodded, suddenly aware of how incredible the engagement must sound when described in simple terms. Yes, sir. The enemy was attempting to assault the school building. There were no other military personnel in the immediate area, so I engaged them with the resources available. Captain Volkov was quiet for a moment, apparently processing the tactical implications of what Elena had accomplished. A single sniper eliminating an entire enemy squad while protecting civilians was the kind of action that would be discussed in military academies for years to come. The school building behind Elena erupted in sounds of joy and relief as teachers explained to the children that the danger had passed and that soldiers had arrived to protect them. Elena could hear children laughing and asking excited questions about the soldier lady who had protected their school. Elena felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Captain Volkov's aide, a young lieutenant who was looking at her with obvious admiration. Sergeant, the captain wants you to know that this engagement will be written up for the highest possible decoration. What you did here today was extraordinary. Elena looked back at the school building, where children's faces were now visible in the windows, smiling and waving at the soldiers who had come to protect them. Elena realized that this moment, seeing those children safe and happy, was worth all the risks she had taken and all the impossible tactical decisions she had been forced to make. Elena's radio crackled with a transmission from the command center. All units, be advised that intelligence reports additional enemy forces in the region. Maintain security and prepare for possible follow-up operations. Elena looked at Captain Volkov with an expression that was part question and part statement. Despite her exhaustion, despite the ammunition she had expended, despite the risk she had already taken, Elena was ready to continue the mission if additional threats to civilians were identified. Captain Volkov seemed to read her expression accurately. Negative, Ghost 7. You are being relieved and ordered to report for medical evaluation and debriefing. This engagement is concluded for you. Elena started to protest, but Captain Volkov held up his hand. That is a direct order, Sergeant. You have done more than enough for one day. Let the rest of us handle any follow-up operations. As Elena walked toward the evacuation vehicle that would take her away from the school, she heard one of the children call out from a window, "Thank you, soldier lady. Thank you for protecting us." Elena turned and waved to the children, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the adrenaline of combat. This was why she had chosen military service, why she had trained to become a sniper, why she was willing to risk her life in impossible situations. The faces of those children, safe and smiling, made every sacrifice worthwhile. Elena climbed into the evacuation vehicle, finally, allowing herself to feel the full extent of her exhaustion. As the vehicle drove away from the school, Elena could see through the rear window that the building was now surrounded by protective military vehicles and that the area was being thoroughly secured against any possible additional threats. Elena closed her eyes and leaned back against the seat, trying to process everything that had happened during the morning engagement. She had started the day as a routine sniper providing overwatch for a suspected enemy movement. She was ending the day as a soldier who had single-handedly defeated an entire enemy squad while protecting a building full of children. Elena's thoughts turned to the letter from her sister that she had been thinking about earlier in the day. Anya's normal life of university exams and social activities seemed even more distant now, but also more precious. Elena was fighting to preserve a world where young people could worry about ordinary things rather than survival against armed enemies. Elena realized that the engagement at the school would probably define her military career and possibly her entire life. The tactical decisions she had made, the risks she had taken, the impossible odds she had overcome, all of these would be studied and analyzed by military professionals for years to come. Elena's radio crackled one final time with a transmission from Captain Volkov. Ghost 7, this is Control. Mission accomplished. Outstanding work today, Sergeant. The children you protected will grow up to tell their own children about the soldier who risked everything to keep them safe. Elena smiled as the evacuation vehicle carried her away from the battlefield. She had joined the military to serve her country and protect innocent civilians. Today, she had done exactly that under circumstances that would test any soldier to the absolute limits of their capabilities. Elena knew that there would be other missions, other enemies, other impossible situations where she would be called upon to risk everything for the greater good. But she also knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always have this day, this engagement, this moment when she had stood alone against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. The vehicle carrying Elena disappeared over a hill, heading toward the command center where she would undergo debriefing and medical evaluation. Behind her, the school building stood intact and safe, filled with children whose lives had been saved by one woman's courage, skill, and determination to never give up when innocent lives were at stake. Elena sat in the medical tent, allowing the field medic to clean and bandage the various cuts and scrapes she had sustained during the engagement. The adrenaline that had carried her through the morning's combat was finally wearing off, and she was beginning to feel every bruise, every strained muscle, every reminder of the physical toll that the impossible mission had taken on her body. The field medic, an experienced sergeant named Petrov, worked with professional efficiency while occasionally shaking his head in amazement at Elena's account of the engagement. 12 enemy soldiers, eliminated by one sniper? Sergeant, that is going to be a story that people tell for generations. Elena winced as Petrov cleaned a particularly deep cut on her forearm. I was just doing my job, Sergeant. The situation required aggressive action, and there were no other options available. Petrov paused in his work and looked at Elena directly. Sergeant, I have been treating combat wounds for 15 years. I have seen soldiers who accomplished remarkable things under extreme circumstances. What you did today goes beyond remarkable into the realm of legendary. Elena did not respond immediately. She was still processing the events of the morning herself, trying to understand how she had managed to survive an engagement that should have resulted in her death within the first few minutes. The tactical decisions she had made defied conventional military wisdom, yet somehow they had resulted in complete success. Captain Volkov entered the medical tent, his expression showing a combination of professional interest and personal concern for Elena's welfare. How is she, Petrov? Multiple minor lacerations, some bruising, signs of physical exhaustion, but nothing serious. She should be fully operational within 24 hours. Captain Volkov nodded and turned to Elena. Sergeant, I need a complete tactical debrief when you are ready. Command wants a detailed analysis of the engagement for training purposes and operational intelligence. Elena straightened in her chair despite Petrov's attempts to continue treating her wounds. I am ready now, sir. Captain Volkov held up his hand. Finish your medical treatment first. The debrief can wait another hour. However, I will tell you that preliminary reports suggest this engagement will result in significant recognition for your actions. Elena felt uncomfortable with the suggestion of recognition and awards. In her mind, she had simply responded to a tactical situation using the training and resources available to her. The fact that the circumstances had been extreme did not change the fundamental nature of her duty as a soldier. Petrov completed his treatment of Elena's wounds and pronounced her fit for duty with the recommendation that she get adequate rest and nutrition over the next few days. Elena thanked him and prepared to accompany Captain Volkov to the command center for the formal debriefing. As they walked across the temporary base that had been established near the school, Elena could see that the entire area was now under heavy security. Military vehicles were positioned at strategic locations, and soldiers were conducting systematic sweeps to ensure that no additional enemies were hiding in the surrounding terrain. Elena noticed that several soldiers stopped what they were doing to watch her pass, and she could hear whispered conversations that included phrases like single-handedly and 12 enemy soldiers. Elena realized that word of the engagement had spread throughout the military unit, and she was already becoming something of a legend among her fellow soldiers. The command center was a large tent equipped with communication equipment, tactical maps, and analysis tools that would allow commanders to understand and evaluate the morning's engagement. Elena could see that her route from the original sniper position to the school building had been traced on a large-scale map, with enemy positions marked and engagement zones clearly defined. Captain Volkov directed Elena to a chair at a large table where several other officers were waiting to hear her account of the engagement. Elena recognized some of the faces, including Major Fedorov, the battalion intelligence officer, and Lieutenant Colonel Dmitri, the regional commander for special operations. Lieutenant Colonel Dmitri spoke first, his tone formal, but showing obvious respect for Elena's accomplishments. Sergeant Kozlova, before we begin the formal debrief, I want you to know that preliminary analysis of this engagement suggests tactical innovation under extreme circumstances. Your actions today will be studied by military academies. Elena felt overwhelmed by the level of attention from senior officers, but she maintained her composure and professional demeanor. Thank you, sir. I was responding to the tactical situation as it developed, using the resources available and the training I had received. Major Fedorov consulted a stack of papers and aerial photographs that apparently showed the engagement area from multiple angles. Sergeant, our initial assessment suggests that you eliminated 11 enemy soldiers while protecting approximately 40 civilian children and 6 adult teachers. Is this count accurate? Elena thought carefully about the question, trying to ensure that her report would be completely accurate. Sir, I can confirm 11 enemy soldiers eliminated. The original enemy force was 12 soldiers. One may have escaped from the grain silo position during the final phase of the engagement. Lieutenant Colonel Dmitri made notes on a tactical pad while asking his next question. Sergeant, describe your decision-making process when you chose to leave your original sniper position and advance toward the enemy. Elena paused to organize her thoughts before responding. The decisions she had made during the engagement had been largely instinctive, based on immediate tactical necessities rather than calculated analysis. However, the officers wanted to understand the reasoning behind those decisions for training and operational purposes. Sir, the enemy squad deviated from their expected route and began approaching the school building where civilian children were located. From my original position, I could not provide effective protection for the civilians while maintaining long-range engagement capability. The situation required aggressive action to prevent mass casualty events among the civilian population. Captain Volkov asked the next question. Sergeant, at what point did you realize that you were engaging the entire enemy squad by yourself without backup support? Elena considered the question carefully. In retrospect, she had probably understood the tactical reality from the beginning of the engagement, but admitting that would suggest that she had knowingly undertaken a suicidal mission. However, honesty was required for an effective debrief. Sir, I understood from the initial contact that backup support was not immediately available and that the enemy force significantly outnumbered my position. However, the presence of civilian children in immediate danger made withdrawal or delay unacceptable options. Major Fedorov looked up from his notes with an expression of professional curiosity. Sergeant, describe your ammunition management throughout the engagement. How did you maintain effective fire with limited resources? Elena had been dreading this question because it would require explaining some of the unconventional tactical decisions she had made during the engagement. Standard sniper doctrine emphasized ammunition conservation and precision shooting, but Elena had been forced to abandon those principles in favor of aggressive assault tactics. Sir, I began the engagement with 12 rounds for my sniper rifle and 15 rounds for my sidearm. During the close quarters phase of the engagement, I appropriated weapons and ammunition from eliminated enemy soldiers. This allowed me to maintain effective fire throughout the engagement despite the extended duration. Lieutenant Colonel Dmitri asked the question that Elena had been expecting and dreading. Sergeant, evaluate your tactical decisions during this engagement. What would you do differently if faced with a similar situation? Elena thought about the question seriously. She had made numerous decisions during the engagement that violated standard military doctrine and tactical principles. However, those same decisions had resulted in complete success and the protection of innocent lives. Sir, the tactical situation required immediate aggressive action to protect civilian lives. Standard defensive procedures would have resulted in mass casualties among the children. While my decisions involved significant personal risk, they were appropriate for the specific circumstances of this engagement. Captain Volkov asked a more personal question. Sergeant, describe your mental state during the engagement. How did you maintain focus and effectiveness under such extreme circumstances? Elena paused before answering this question. She wanted to be honest about the psychological challenges of the engagement while also maintaining her professional image as a competent soldier. The truth was that fear and adrenaline had been constant companions throughout the morning, but training and determination had allowed her to function effectively despite those challenges. Sir, training and focus on mission objectives allowed me to maintain effectiveness. The presence of civilian children in danger provided additional motivation to succeed despite the tactical disadvantages. Major Fedorov asked about intelligence gathering during the engagement. Sergeant, what tactical information did you obtain about enemy capabilities, organization, and intentions during the engagement? Elena organized her observations about the enemy force before responding. Despite the intensity of the combat, she had noticed several important details about the enemy soldiers that might be useful for future operations. Sir, the enemy force was well equipped with modern weapons and appeared to have extensive training in mountain warfare. They demonstrated good tactical discipline and communication procedures. Their equipment suggested they were a specialized unit rather than regular infantry. The presence of mortar weapons indicated they were prepared for sustained operations against fixed targets. Lieutenant Colonel Dmitri asked the final question of the formal debrief. Sergeant, do you believe there are additional enemy forces in this region that might pose ongoing threats to civilian populations? Elena thought about the radio transmissions she had heard during the engagement and the escape of at least one enemy soldier from the grain silo position. Based on those observations, she could not rule out the possibility of additional threats. Sir, radio communications during the engagement suggested possible coordination with other units. The escaped enemy soldier could provide intelligence about our capabilities and positions to other hostile forces. I recommend continued security operations in this region until additional threats can be eliminated. Captain Volkov concluded the formal debrief and dismissed the other officers. Elena remained in her chair. Suddenly, feeling the full weight of exhaustion that she had been fighting throughout the day. The debrief had required her to relive every moment of the engagement, bringing back the stress and tension that had defined the entire morning. Captain Volkov sat down across from Elena, his expression showing personal concern rather than professional interest. "Elena, how are you really feeling about what happened today?" Elena considered the question seriously. She felt proud of her success in protecting the children, but she also felt overwhelmed by the recognition and attention that her actions were generating. She had joined the military to serve her country, not to become a hero or legend. "Sir, I am gratified that the civilian population was protected and that the mission was successful. However, I am concerned about the level of attention this engagement is generating. I would prefer to return to normal operational duties." Captain Volkov smiled and shook his head. "Elena, there is nothing normal about eliminating an entire enemy squad by yourself while protecting a building full of children. This engagement is going to define your military career whether you want it to or not." Elena realized that Captain Volkov was probably correct. The events of this morning would follow her throughout her military service and probably for the rest of her life. She would be known as the sniper who accomplished the impossible, who stood alone against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. Captain Volkov stood to leave, then paused at the entrance to the command center. "Elena, you should know that the teachers and children at the school have been asking about you. They want to thank the soldier lady who protected them. Would you be willing to visit the school before we leave this area?" Elena felt a warmth in her chest at the mention of the children. Throughout all the tactical analysis and military recognition, the most important fact remained simple. Children were alive today because of her actions. Everything else was secondary to that fundamental truth. "Yes, sir. I would be honored to visit the school." As Captain Volkov left the command center, Elena remained alone with her thoughts and the tactical maps that showed the scene of her impossible victory. She traced the route she had taken from the mountain sniper position to the final assault on the grain silos, marveling at the distance covered and the number of tactical decisions that had been required during those crucial hours. Elena thought about her sister's letter again, about the normal life of university studies and social activities that seemed so distant from military combat. Elena wondered if she would ever be able to return to a normal life, or if the events of this day had changed her permanently. Elena heard voices outside the command center and realized that soldiers were returning from their security sweeps of the surrounding area. Soon, this temporary base would be dismantled, and the military units would move on to other missions and other challenges. The school would return to its normal routine, and the children would grow up with memories of the morning when a soldier lady had protected them from harm. Elena stood and walked to the entrance of the command center, looking out at the school building in the distance. The building appeared peaceful and normal now, with no signs of the violence that had threatened to destroy it just hours earlier. Children were playing in the schoolyard under the watchful protection of military guards, their laughter carrying across the distance. Elena realized that this moment, this peaceful scene of children at play in safety, represented everything that she had fought to protect. This was why she had chosen military service, why she had trained to become a sniper, why she was willing to risk her life against impossible odds. Elena picked up her rifle and checked its condition one final time before leaving the command center. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve her country and protect innocent people. Today had proven that even impossible situations could be overcome with courage, skill, and determination. Elena walked toward the school building, ready to meet the children whose lives she had saved and to complete the most important part of her mission, ensuring that they understood they were safe and protected by people who would never give up fighting for their security and happiness.